Well, it's great to be here with you this morning. Heard this story about a little boy who wanted $100. For some reason, he wanted $100, and he wanted it badly. So badly that he started praying for it. Lord, give me $100. Give me $100. He prayed for 2 weeks, every day, multiple times a day, for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, nothing happened. So he determined he was going to write God a letter. He couldn't find God's email address, so he thought, well, I'll just write an old school letter to God asking for $100. So he writes the letter and addresses it to God, comma, USA. Well, when the postal people got that letter, they didn't know where to send that, so they thought, well, I guess the closest we could get is we'll send it to the president. So they sent the president that letter addressed to God, USA. The president's staff got the letter. They were amused. They just thought it was the sweetest thing that this little fella wanted $100. So because of their amusement, because of their amusement with the letter, they sent it on to the president. Make sure he saw it. The president felt the same way. Thought this was so cute, so sweet. So he instructed his advisors, his staff, to send back this little boy, send him a $5 bill. Put a $5 bill in an envelope, send it to him. Appreciate that. Well, so they did. And so when the boy got this letter back, how excited he was. His request had been answered. So he was going to write God another letter. This time it was going to be a thank you note. So he sat down to write the note. It said, Dear God, thank you for sending me the money. However, I noticed that for some reason you had it sent through Washington, D.C., and as usual, they deducted $95. Yeah, well, cute little story about money. But these days, there are not that many cute stories about money, are there? Economic issues are big. Financial issues are big. Whether the story comes from Washington, D.C., or even comes out of our state. You know, California, I don't know if you knew this or not, but California has the 9th largest economy in the world. Not the United States, but in the world. 9th largest. And yet we struggle. We struggle. Unemployment rates continue to rise. Funding for state programs continues to sink. And citizens grow in the frustration over all of that. But of course, where the economic issues hit hardest is at home. When we sit down in front of the computer or the checkbook, we balance the checkbook and we try to figure out how to make it to the next week or the next week. And we try to make sure, how are we going to keep up what we're making to keep up with what we're spending. We're all very attuned to economics. So this morning I want to talk about economic realities. Economic realities affect us on so many levels, as I've just illustrated, but I want to talk this morning about God's economics. God's economics. The title of the sermon is Holy Economics. Now, if you were to see that written down, Holy Economics, you may think, well, is this like, you remember the old Batman TV show? Whether you saw it live with me way back in the 60s or you've seen it on YouTube or reruns or whatever, Robin, the sidekick, is always saying holy something to Batman. Remember that? Holy this, Batman. Holy. Every time he would exclaim, it was holy something. You know, holy car motors, Batman, or whatever. And so you may think holy economics should be pronounced like that. Holy economics! It's not exactly what I'm shooting for this morning. Let me qualify what I mean by holy economics. By that, I'm not talking about financial blessings which God may give us. Or hopefully you don't think this, but some people think that God owes us financial blessings. He doesn't. I'm not going to talk about that. And I'm also not talking about wise Christian money investment ideas. Have you ever heard of Dave Ramsey? he does this thing called Financial Peace University. It's a great thing. It's a really great thing. But I'm not talking about that when I say holy economics. And neither am I talking about how to get people to give more money to church. Not talking about any of that when I talk about holy economics. Actually, what I'm talking about this morning is principles. Principles about how God hires and pays. If you can think about it kind of in an employment analogy, how he hires and pays his children. It's actually a set of economic realities that may affect us deeper than we think. So with that in mind, let's turn to the text. Matthew chapter 20. The first book in the New Testament. The first of the four Gospels, Matthew chapter 20. And I'm going to read several verses here, beginning in verse 1 all the way to verse 16. Because I want you to get the full weight of this story before I start talking about it. Matthew 20, beginning in verse 1. All these are words of Jesus. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire men to work in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About the third hour, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I'll pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about the 6th hour and the 9th hour and did the same thing. About the 11th hour, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Well, because no one's hired us," they answered. He said to them, "Will you also then go and work in my vineyard?" When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about the 11th hour came and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These men who were hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you've made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the work in the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "Friend, I'm not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the man